Have you ever noticed how certain relationships turn your pain into an invisible prison? Arthur Schopenhauer believed that suffering is not an accident, but an inevitable part of life, and manipulators know how to use this against you. Picture yourself standing before a silent abyss. Every step you try to take is pulled back again. Today, you will see how your pain can become the strongest chain in the hands of those who wish to control you. Have you noticed how, even after an argument ends, the feeling of guilt keeps echoing inside you? It is as if the manipulator's voice remains active in your mind, repeating phrases that make you believe the fault was always yours. This is the first symptom, carrying guilt that was never born in you, but planted there to keep you weakened. Another silent sign is emotional dependence. You begin to feel incapable of making decisions without imagining how the other person will react. Before you speak, you measure your words. Before you act, you already wonder if it will be approved or punished. Little by little, your freedom dissolves, and you find yourself living inside someone else's expectations. And then there's the inner emptiness, that constant feeling that something is missing. The manipulator feeds on exactly that. He creates small voids, withdraws support at the very moment you need it most, and then offers himself as the only solution. This way, you are trained to believe that peace can only be found at his side, even though it is precisely his presence that imprisons you. Understand this is not by chance. It is not bad luck, nor coincidence. There is an invisible mechanism, repeated in so many toxic relationships, the cycle of suffering. The more pain you feel, the easier it is to be controlled. The manipulator turns your vulnerability into invisible ropes that bind you, without you even noticing. And here lies the most dangerous point. You start to believe that pain is normal, that every bond works this way. This silent acceptance is the perfect trap. You convince yourself there is no way out, while your vital energy is drained little by little. You feel it, don't you? That unease that follows you even in moments of silence, as if your mind could never rest. That is the proof the wound is still alive. And the more you ignore it, the deeper it becomes. The manipulator knows this, and that is exactly where he keeps his control. Now comes the question that cannot be avoided. How long will you allow this pain to be used against you? Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the darkest and most lucid philosophers in history, believed that suffering is not an accident, but the very essence of human existence. For him, life is driven by a blind force, called the will, which never finds complete satisfaction. Every pleasure, then, is only a brief pause, and pain always returns, like an inevitable shadow. To put it simply, for Schopenhauer, living means carrying a hunger that is never fulfilled. Each desire achieved opens the space for another, and the happiness we feel lasts only a fleeting moment before dissolving again. Now, think about what this means inside a toxic relationship. If pain is already part of life, the manipulator learns how to exploit this truth in a cruel way. He turns the natural suffering of existence into a psychological prison. He takes what Schopenhauer described as inevitable and uses it as a strategy of power. When you feel guilt, dependence, or emptiness, the manipulator knows exactly how to intensify those states. He does not create pain out of nothing. He simply shapes it, stretches it, and makes you believe that only through him can you find relief. It is as if he takes the universal suffering Schopenhauer described and forges it into chains made just for you. And here lies the most disturbing point. Schopenhauer said that pain follows us because we desire, because we never stop wanting. The manipulator, whether consciously or not, feeds this very machine. He awakens in you desires that can never be fully satisfied, to be completely accepted, to be loved without flaws, to be understood in every detail, and then frustrates you on purpose. In this way, philosophy meets emotional reality. Schopenhauer's theory becomes practice in the hands of someone who uses your own nature against you. Suffering, which was already inevitable, is multiplied. And trapped in this dynamic, you begin to confuse pain with attachment, believing that to endure is the same as to love. It is at this point that you realize it is not merely bad luck or destiny. It is an ancient game, sustained by a philosophical truth, and you must learn to see how it operates if you do not want to be consumed by it. Now you begin to see the hidden game. The manipulator does not act only through harsh words or bursts of anger. He creates a silent theater in which you play a role you never chose. With every gesture, every calculated silence, he reinforces a narrative that you must remain trapped. It is as if he places a smiling mask before you, while behind it he holds the invisible strings that control your every move. This is the central mechanism, pain turned into spectacle. He projects onto you his own flaws and shadows, and makes you believe they are yours. You find yourself carrying guilt that does not belong to you, fears that were born in him, insecurities that come from his mask. In psychology, this process is called projection. But here, in the dark field of human relationships, it becomes a sharpened weapon. Imagine being in a labyrinth. Each time you find an exit, he moves the walls. You believe you are making progress, but in truth, you are still circling the same narrow path. That is what it feels like to try to fix a relationship with a manipulator. The harder you try, the more trapped you become. And there is something even more disturbing. The manipulator understands that your pain is renewable. He does not need to invent new punishments all the time. He only needs to reopen old ones. A comment that seems harmless, a look of disdain at the precise moment, a prolonged silence. All of it reactivates old pains, as if pulling on strings tied long ago. You begin to realize this is not just a difficult relationship. It is a psychological battlefield. He does not need to shout, raise his hand, or leave visible marks. The most powerful weapon is invisible, turning your own mind into a prison. And here comes the turning point that must be spoken. This cycle does not persist because he is stronger. It persists because you have not yet recognized that you're inside a game. A game where every move has been calculated to keep you hostage to your own pain. In the next step, you will understand why, even knowing all this, so many people remain trapped in the cycle, and what it truly takes to finally break it. The moment comes when you must turn the game around. Until now, pain has been used against you. But when you change the way you respond to it, all of the manipulator's power begins to collapse. The first step is simple, though it may feel impossible. Recognize the pattern. Know what is happening. Each time you feel guilt, emptiness, or dependence, instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" ask yourself, "Whose voice is this inside me?" That single act of awareness already weakens the invisible chain. The second turning point is strategic silence. Manipulators feed on your reaction. The more you explain yourself, the more material they have to twist. By refusing the verbal battle, by responding with silence or with short, neutral phrases, you cut off the energy source that sustains the cycle. This is not passivity, but choice. It is the power of not handing your emotions over to the other. The third step is to create boundaries. This might be a firm no, a temporary distance, or even a definitive break, depending on the severity. A boundary is not punishment. It is self-preservation. Schopenhauer said suffering is inevitable, but that does not mean you must accept the suffering imposed by another human being as destiny. A boundary is the point where you decide that your pain will no longer be manipulated. Of course, the emotional cost of these actions is high. At first, you will feel loneliness, doubt, fear of losing the relationship or being rejected. The manipulator will try to reinforce this fear, making you believe you are wrong or selfish. But that discomfort is only the pain of breaking free, not the pain of imprisonment. It is the price of the first step toward freedom. The gain, on the other hand, is immeasurable. With time, you realize you no longer need to walk in circles inside the labyrinth. You find clarity. You feel a quiet strength growing each time you refuse to react the old way. The manipulator loses control because he discovers your pain is no longer the chain that binds you. When you recognize the pattern, practice strategic silence, and set boundaries, something profound happens. The narrative flips. And for the first time, you taste the real essence of inner freedom. Now that you understand how pain is used as a prison, I want to suggest a simple gesture. In the comments, write the phrase, "My pain will not be a prison." This declaration is not for others, but for you. It is a reminder that today you recognize the game and began to break it. If this video resonated with you, subscribe to continue this journey. Each new piece of content here is another step to help you see beyond the masks and protect your mind against manipulation. A small act can mark a great turning point. Write the mantra, subscribe, and move forward. The first step has already been taken. Up to this point, you have understood that pain is used as a weapon. But there is a deeper layer, and it is here that Schopenhauer's philosophy becomes even more revealing. For him, pain is not only suffering, it is also a sign of movement, of life. It is the engine that reveals where desire exists, where something is missing, where something is still pulsing inside you. The manipulator understands this instinctively. He knows that if he touches your wound, he awakens energy. And instead of allowing you to use that energy to grow, he diverts it to feed his control. What could be a transforming force becomes a vicious circle. Thus, pain, which could set you free, is hijacked to imprison you. Now imagine a simple, everyday example. You open your heart. You share an insecurity with someone you trust. Instead of receiving it with care, that person later uses your confession against you, throwing your own vulnerability back at you like a weapon. This gesture may seem small, but it reveals the entire mechanism. Your pain, which could have been a path to intimacy and understanding, is turned into a tool of domination. But there is another perspective. In psychology, we speak of the shadow, the part of yourself you hide, yet which carries immense potential. Pain, when acknowledged, is like a key that opens this hidden part. What the manipulator does is try to convince you that this shadow is nothing but weakness. Awakening happens when you realize it is also a source of autonomy. Schopenhauer said we cannot eliminate suffering, but we can choose how we relate to it. And here lies the difference. When you stop running from pain and begin to face it, it loses its power to be manipulated. Instead of a chain, it becomes fuel. This is the point where the game changes. The same wound that was once used to control you can become the very place from which your independence is born. It is not easy, it is not immediate, but it is real. The pain that once served as a prison can be transformed into a path of individuation. The process of becoming whole, even in the presence of shadows. Now imagine what happens when nothing changes. When you recognize the signs but choose to ignore them, hoping time will heal on its own. The truth is harsh. The manipulator does not need to do much to keep you trapped. He only has to leave the wound open, because the very silence of pain already works in his favor. The consequence is endless repetition. Each cycle returns with more strength. Each accusation weighs heavier. Each absence empties you further. You begin to feel as if you are living inside a closed circle, where every attempt to escape only takes you back to the starting point. This is the essence of the prison. No matter how hard you fight, the feeling is that you never move forward. Schopenhauer described life as a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. In the context of a toxic relationship, that pendulum becomes even more cruel. When the manipulator wounds you, you suffer. When he goes silent, you feel emptiness. It is as if there is no place of rest, only extremes that keep you in constant exhaustion. The image is clear, a downward spiral. You believe you are moving, but in truth, you are sinking step by step into a fall that drains your vital energy. The manipulator knows this and feeds the process, because the weaker you feel, the less you question, the less you resist, the less you dare to imagine a different life. And there is something even darker. Over time, you begin to confuse this pain with love. You start to believe that enduring is proof of affection, that resisting is the same as loyalty. This is the most dangerous point because the prison becomes internal. It is no longer the manipulator who holds you captive. It is your own mind convincing you there is no way out. But here comes the inevitable question. If nothing is done, how far can this take you? How long can the body endure carrying guilt that was never yours? How long can the mind withstand living in repetition? This tension must reach its breaking point before a decision is made. In the next step, you will see how liberation is possible and why only a few have the courage to cross that boundary. After walking through the labyrinth of pain, you must find the exit. Liberation does not begin when the manipulator changes, but when you decide to change the way you relate to your own wound. The first step is to name this new state, clarity. It is like turning on a light in a room that has been dark for years. The pain is still there, but under the light it no longer frightens you in the same way. You realize you no longer need to run from it. You can face it head on. This awakening creates a different presence. You stop reacting automatically and begin to respond with awareness. The manipulator expects the old version of you, the one who gave in, explained, justified. But when he encounters someone silently firm, someone who does not hand over their energy, he loses the ground beneath the game. It is in that moment that your quiet strength begins to grow. To anchor this change, practice a small daily ritual. Choose a moment of the day, sit in silence for just 1 minute, and breathe. During that minute, repeat to yourself, "My pain does not define me." This simple act works as an anchor. It reminds you that you are not the chain. You are the one who can release it. The manipulator may try to awaken your guilt or emptiness, but this inner silence will always be your refuge. And remember, this is not an easy path. Few have the courage to break the cycle. Many prefer to remain trapped, because the prison feels familiar and freedom feels frightening. But you are not among the many. By coming this far, you have already shown rare courage. The courage to look within and face what once held you captive. Liberation is not a sudden rupture, but a process of reconfiguration. Each time you recognize the pattern, each time you practice conscious silence, each time you refuse to accept pain as a prison, you strengthen your identity. Pain stops being a weapon against you and becomes a sign of transformation. This is the true power, turning the chain into a key, the wound into a path, the silence into presence. You do not merely survive the game, you transcend it. Pain only imprisons you when you believe it is final. The moment you decide to face it as part of the path, it stops being a chain and becomes strength. Schopenhauer reminded us that suffering is inevitable, but you have just seen that it does not need to be manipulated. It does not need to be used against you. If these words brought you clarity, share this video with someone who also needs to see beyond the invisible prison of pain. Sometimes, a single message is enough to light up a room that once seemed condemned to darkness. And remember, subscribing to this channel is not just a click, but a silent commitment to your own freedom. Each new video is another step on this path of awareness, where you turn pain into power and silence into presence. Keep this phrase as a symbol of what you gain today. Pain only wins when you forget that you can transform it into strength. See you in the shadows of the next hidden truth.